it could be this one. Well, what do you want to hear? Let's see. Do you want a waltz? Well, we can waltz much as you can handle. We can dare to have a dance or two. But for all your faults, they don't hold a candle compared to the wonders of you. Spin, 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 till the dancing does you in. Somewhere further on, where the bands are played by the song, we'll waltz again. Now there's a howling o'er the landscape. The weeds here, they tumble and twirl, but there's no escape from leaving this here world. Spin, 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 till the dancing does us in. Somewhere beyond this land, where the songs still play, the band will waltz again. Somewhere further on, where the band is played by the song, we'll waltz again.
That in a way you're like responsible for us forming the band. Because it was, I went to see your concert, he went to see your concert, but we both went, alone. And at the end of the concert, he asked me for a ride, and I don't have a car, so we had to walk. So because of that walk and because of your concert, that's how that combo started.
Yeah. But I'm not responsible for the hat you wore.
No.
The big hat. Oh, no. But that's the best thing about music is that it always gets handed down or handed over. And it keeps evolving.
Yeah.
So it's in a way the worst thing about music is recordings. I mean, recordings are handy. And
You don't like recording?
I love it, but you have to be careful not to love it too much, because if you keep playing like a recording, then you begin to kill music a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think that it's always supposed to be changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only kind of music that allowed that, or celebrated that or was known for it was jazz in the 50s and, well, all through the ages from the 30s right up to the, could say till now, but the 60s, 50s and 60s, it was important changes. And it would change every night. And then the records were some kind of evidence. But the problem with recording is when bands are learning and they get these recordings and they try to sound like those particular records. And I think bands should not listen to any music for the first 30 years. Let's see what they come up with.
You feel different playing in America or in Europe? The public, the people?
Well, I've worked more in Europe over the last 30 years, especially the last 15. So I can play more places here and make a living, raise up some kids, buy a house, have a car or two.
But in the States you couldn't?
In the States I didn't work it enough.
Okay.
Especially when I got the Danish band around 2002. You know, in the 90s, it was gearing up to be good. In the early 90s, we got our first big record deal. And we toured with a band called Grant Lee Buffalo, 1994, I think, 93, 94. And they just had their first big record deal. And Grant Lee has a beautiful voice and very catchy songs, hook-oriented. And everything else about the band was fantastic. They were a three-piece, we were a three-piece. They were similar in how we played guitar and used distortion with an acoustic guitar. And then within a short time, disaster hit for our camp where things went wrong. And the 90s fell apart, for us anyway. And in the end, at the end of the 90s, the band began to splinter off into what is now Calexico. And that, I lost a lot of momentum because they were the other two guys in the band, the rhythm section. And I had been with John, the drummer, for many years before that. So that was a disturbing point where I didn't know how to continue on. But I didn't want the band to end with that disaster because it would have felt terrible to have that memory. Worse than that was the guy who started this band with me, Reiner, had brain cancer. And within 20 months, he would die after he got it. And that was turning everything upside down. Because Reiner was my reinvented older brother. So because of him, I developed the way I did. And so you guys probably got together because of Reiner. And so the 90s were rough, and when the dust settled and the 2000s came along, I began to have more babies. I married a woman from Denmark right near the end of the 90s and began to discover Scandinavia more, and then attracted those players, those beautiful players, and then it became Giant Sand again somehow. And then we pretty much just worked over here. The music only needs a healthy tour or two to develop the next record. So it was always practical that way. But to tour for like 2 years on one record never made much sense. And to play the same songs the same way for 2 years from that record also didn't make sense to me.
Do you play the same songs with the band, like the same way every time, or do you just...
That's impossible for me.
Yeah, okay.
Because of what I said earlier, I believe when you do that, you begin to kill music a little bit. So to put life into music, to let music live what it's supposed to do, you got to let it change you every night somewhat. Yeah, so then the 2000s were great because I ended up making a record with a gospel choir, and then with
No Angel Like You.
Yeah,
it's an amazing record.
Yeah, and then and that drummer went on to become the drummer for the Arcade Fire, Jeremy Guerra. Mm-hmm. He's very good, and he really was the spark of that record for me. And I just met him. He was a young kid in the studio, this little studio garage in Ottawa, and then him and I would do. I like to play with just a drummer, and now I'm going to do this record with jazz standards or song standards, but I can't really learn standards very well. They don't sound correct, so I'm writing my own. There'll be future standards. And that's what tonight will be and the next record will be.